I'm on fire.
This podcast assumes that you have a general knowledge of the Tate LaBianca murders. Sharon Tate Polanski, Jay Sebring, Wojciech Frykowski, Abigail Folger, and Stephen Parent were murdered on Cielo Drive in Los Angeles on August 9, 1969. Lena and Rosemary LaBianca were slain in their Los Feliz residence the following night. Charles Manson, Charles Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Quenwinkle, and Leslie Van Houten were convicted of those murders. Say hello to the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast. And hello it is. Hi, I'm George Stimson, and welcome to the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast, Live 11. I hope that everyone is doing okay this evening. I have a prepared statement to read tonight, and so if you'll excuse me, I'm going to put on my reading glasses. All right. I had originally planned to do a podcast tonight on Susan Atkins' grand jury testimony and compare that testimony to the physical evidence apparent at the crime scene on Cielo Drive in an attempt to come to some kind of reasonable conclusions. I had lots of interesting things to look about and talk about. My guest was going to be James Dawson, a fellow who has made 4 previous appearances here. Unfortunately, in the interim before the episode was finalized, a storm blew up on the internet based on statements that James made regarding the Tate LaBianca murders on a couple of other podcasts. Those statements were wildly untrue and seemed totally out of character for James, who seems otherwise to be greatly knowledgeable about the case. So what was going on? I first encountered James after I contacted him after he made positive comments on an early episode of this podcast. He was cooperative, enthusiastic, and he had and has an encyclopedic knowledge of the references in this case, such as trial transcripts, parole hearing statements, video interviews, and just about anything else. Anytime I asked James for something, he sent it right away, and everything he sent me was solid in terms of evidence. And although many of his interpretations of the evidence were the same as mine, I didn't accept all of his conclusions, nor did he accept mine. In any case, the James Dawson I was hearing about on the internet last week was not the James Dawson I had been dealing with for the last 5 or 6 months. So I watched the podcast in question, and I'm not going to recount James's case inaccuracies here, but some of them were so bad, you would think they came from someone who heard about the case once 20 years ago and was misremembering, not from someone as well-versed in the case material as James is. So what was the deal? I contacted James to find out. What he told me was that he had been harassed on the internet in various venues for almost a year by a particular troll, and he wanted to find out who the troll was. James relishes engaging with trolls, and in order for him to smoke out this troll, he devised a plan to participate in a podcast full of Manson case inaccuracies and falsehoods and see if the troll, under his real identity, reported the mistakes elsewhere, and voila, troll identified. So that was the reason for the 2 podcasts. Now, some of James's misdeclarations were subtle and off the cuff, and they did sound like somebody who simply didn't know what he was talking about. But others, like the floor plan of the Lizzie Borden house being presented as the LaBianca house, were so off that it should have been obvious that legs were being pulled. But it wasn't obvious. And all of this is fine if that's what you're into, but I'm not. To me, the interest here in the case and the various theories of the case, the interest here is in the case and the various theories of the case, not about any of the proponents of any of the theories. None of that is relevant to me, and I don't pay much attention to the back and forth that goes on between various factions who have devoted their attention to this case for whatever reasons. There was an unfortunate incident where I had to address internet accusations made against me by the peddler of a fake Manson will, but after that, I had really hoped to be able to put that kind of melodrama behind me. So tonight, I'm going to. Originally, James was going to be on the podcast tonight so that he could explain his position. I also wanted to open up the podcast to viewers, any interested viewers who would like to comment. But on second thought, I realized that by doing so, I would only make a bad situation worse. So I told James I'd do the podcast solo and not have any viewer input. I would gladly still use James as a source of legitimate information about the case, because his ability to catalog and retrieve relevant material is really remarkable. But unless I can get some more live guests scheduled, I will likely go back to the old podcast format of doing video presentations. It is more interesting when a few people can toss around ideas, but I want the topic of discussion to be about the crimes and not about the people who are doing the discussion. So that's all I have for you this evening. If you'd like to make any comments or questions, please put them in the comments section below and I'll take a look at them. Otherwise, I hope to see you here next time on the next episode of the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast. This has been the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast, the podcast dedicated to the truth about the Tate LaBianca murders, Charles Manson, and more. The views expressed on this program are solely those of the individual speakers, and they do not necessarily represent the thoughts, ideas, or opinions of any other persons, either living or dead. Visit our companion website at www.goodbyehelterskelter.com. There you can find more information about this podcast. Also, check out the Goodbye Helter Skelter Facebook page for information on upcoming programs. And let us know what you think by way of contact@goodbyehelterskelter.com. We will address any comments, questions, or concerns on future installments of the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast.